should public employees have the right to strike? Now, if every public employee in the country struck all at once, we'd have some 9 million people on strike, a great part of our labor force, and this would include firemen, policemen, teachers, sanitation workers. Actually, at issue here is a very basic thing. Should the public employees have the same right to collective bargaining with its inherent right to strike as other employees, or should the public claim that their interest to maintain all essential services comes first and that there can be no right to strike? Well, now, to discuss this question with us here tonight, we have a man who says emphatically that public employees should have the right to strike, and he is a veteran of 30 years in the labor movement. He is president of the International Transport Workers Union. He is a member of the Executive Council of the AFL-CIO, Mr. Michael Quill. And Mr. Quill, will you tell us your position?
Well, sir, I believe that all civil service employees should have the right to strike. They should have the right to genuine collective bargaining. They should have the right to a union shop agreement, to a signed contract, to grievance machinery. They should have all the rights that every other American citizen has. Believe it or not, there are 8,300,000 civil service workers in this country. That's an army of people bigger than some European populations, some European countries' populations. We're talking this year, 1961, about the year of the new frontiers. These civil service workers remind me of the last brigade of the old frontier. They're poorly paid, their hours are not the best, their working conditions are miserable, and they have absolutely no freedom. We have here in the city of New York 24,000 policemen. If there is any group of workers in America that's being treated like second-class citizens, it is the policemen of New York City and of many cities in between, from New York to the south to the west coast. I say that civil service employees, whether they are state troopers, city policemen, firemen, teachers, customs guards, prison guards, or anything else, that they should all have equal rights as American citizens. They should not take a second role. After having said this, I believe that strike is unnecessary. I believe that intelligent government in a county, city, or state or national basis can bring about such machinery whereby the employees can have genuine collective bargaining, like the Transport Workers Union have in New York City, for 30,000 civil service subway workers who are civil service employees for the last 20 years. We have represented these workers since they were private employees for the last 30 years. And we have never struck the subways of New York for 1 hour in the last 30 years, last 27 years, last 20 years, last 15 years. If it can be done for civil service workers in the subways of New York, it can be done for policemen, for firemen, for the 1,500,000 teachers in this country who are being asked to teach without the protection of collective bargaining. And people will say, well, you're not supposed to have a union for teachers because it would be bad for the morale of the kids. I think it is worse for the morale of the kids to think that they are being taught by second-class citizens, by teachers who do not have a signed contract, by teachers who do not have recognition of their union, by teachers who do not have collective bargaining. It is for these reasons that I believe that the 8,300,000 civil service workers in the United States should take their rightful place along with the ranks of the other American citizens, with full collective bargaining and full job security.
Thank you, Mr. Quill. Now, from the other side of the issue, we speak to another veteran in the labor field, an attorney, Mr. Fred Hartley, who was congressman from New Jersey from 1929 to 1948, and he was the author, with the late Senator Taft, of the famous Taft-Hartley bill. Now, Mr. Hartley, would you tell us your position on this issue?
Well, Mr. McCaffrey and Mr. Quill, let me say, first of all, I don't think there's any subject on which Mr. Quill and I would find ourselves in greater disagreement with one possible exception, that being the Taft-Hartley law, than we are on this particular subject. I am opposed to strikes by public employees, whether they be federal, municipal, or county, because I believe that the public interest comes first. I believe that the public interest comes first. And I don't believe that a majority of Mr. Quill's own transport workers' union want to strike and see tens and hundreds of thousands of fellow workers inconvenienced on their way to and from their jobs. I don't believe that a majority of the sanitation workers of the city of New York, or any other city for that matter, want to endanger the health of this city by striking and permitting garbage to pile up on the streets of this particular great metropolis. I don't believe that the majority of the teachers want to strike and interfere with the orderly progress of our children and our grandchildren. And lastly, I certainly don't believe that the police and firemen want to risk sabotage, vandalism, and all sorts of things in a great city like this city and other cities throughout the United States by going out on strike. I prefer to think of those policemen and firemen as the men who went to that catastrophe in Brooklyn, weren't called there, didn't get time and a half or double time for overtime or anything like that, went there because they saw a duty to perform and did it out of their public responsibility, just as the extra firemen who were not called out but who went there voluntarily at that fire at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. I believe, I'd like to read two statements, incidentally, in this connection. One by the late mayor of the city of New York, Fiorello LaGuardia. He wrote, and I'm only reading a part of this, the rapid transit system, including subways, elevated, buses, and trolleys owned by the city, are operated by the city for the benefit of the people of the city. This department is just as much a department of the city as the Department of Water Supply, police department, fire departments, the schools, or any other branch of the city government. The city does not and cannot recognize the right of any group to strike against the city. I want to also read what the late President Franklin Delano Roosevelt said on this subject. He said, and I quote, "A strike of public employees manifests nothing less than an intent on their part to obstruct the operations of government until their demands are satisfied. Such action, looking toward the paralysis of government by those who are sworn to support it, is unthinkable and intolerable." And let me say this. I take this position because I don't support any attitude on the part of either an industrial giant or a labor leader who says the public be damned.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hartley. Well, now, gentlemen, you have a period of discussion where you may interrogate each other, cross-examine each other, or have at each other, depending upon how you feel about it. Mr. Quill, we'll let you start this off.
I wish to say this to the audience, both here and outside, and to Congressman Hartley, that I qualified my statement by saying that intelligent management, either in government or in private ownership, along with intelligent leadership, can have a union, can have collective bargaining, and can do it without a strike, the same as we have done it in the subways. I'm not talking about what the majority of TWU men have or how they feel, but we have never stuck the subways because we always found the collective bargaining door open to us. Mayor O'Dwyer opened it first, and Mayor Wagner have kept it open. And we have a signed contract, and we have the same responsibility towards the people of the city of New York that you have, sir, or any other body. I'm amazed to hear you quoting Franklin Roosevelt, because it is some switch when a Republican, an ex-congressman from the Republican Party, and the chosen mouthpiece of big business in America is falling back in Franklin D. Roosevelt as an authority on something. That is some switch, and I thank you.
Well, let me say this, Mr.
Congressman Hartley.
Mr. Quill, I was expecting that remark from you. Let me say this, but I'll quote anybody when he's right, and I'll quote you when you're right.
You won't get started. From the position that you hold in big business, I don't think you'll ever quote me.
Well, I will when you're right, as I said before. Now let me see if we can understand just what your position is. You support the right of any public employee, including the police and fire department, to go on strike?